The most dangerous secrets are not the ones hidden in a locked room. They are the ones everyone agrees to forget. I learned that lesson on the day Harrison's will was opened. My name is Ethan Harrison, and until that afternoon, I believed I understood my family. The Harrison estate had always felt timeless. The massive dining room, the crystal chandeliers, the portraits lining the walls, and the long oak table where generations had gathered all seemed untouched by change. Yet beneath that polished surface, something had been waiting for years to emerge. The family attorney, Thomas, arrived shortly before noon carrying a leather briefcase that immediately changed the atmosphere of the house. Conversations became quieter. Smiles became strained. Even the staff seemed aware that something important was about to happen. Harrison sat silently at the far end of the dining table, his weathered face unreadable beneath his silver hair. Isabel sat beside David, appearing calm and elegant as she poured herself a glass of water. Eleanor remained beneath the chandelier, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. James stood near the fireplace as quietly as always. I took my seat halfway down the table and watched as Thomas organized several documents before him. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows overlooking the estate grounds. Outside, everything looked peaceful. Inside, tension filled every corner of the room. Thomas adjusted his glasses and began reading. Most of the opening provisions sounded predictable. Charitable donations, property instructions, trust distributions. Nothing surprising. Then he stopped. The pause lasted only a few seconds, but it immediately captured everyone's attention. Thomas looked down at the next page before continuing. The following provision shall remain in effect until the location of the missing heir is determined. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the sound of the grandfather clock in the hallway suddenly seemed louder. I glanced toward David. His expression had completely changed. Isabel lowered her eyes to the table. Eleanor gripped her teacup so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. Harrison remained perfectly still. Thomas continued reading. No final distribution shall occur until all beneficiaries named in the original family record have been accounted for. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Missing heir. Original family record. The words felt completely foreign, yet somehow everyone else in the room seemed to understand exactly what they meant. That was when I noticed something I would never forget. Across the table, Isabel and Eleanor exchanged a brief glance filled with fear. And in that moment, I realized the will was not revealing a financial secret. It was revealing a person nobody wanted to remember. For several long seconds, nobody said a word. The silence felt heavier than the will itself. I looked around the table and realized I was the only person who seemed confused. Everyone else recognized the meaning behind those words. Everyone except me. Thomas cleared his throat and continued reading, but the room had already changed. The formal meeting no longer felt like a routine legal procedure. It felt like the beginning of an old argument nobody wanted to revisit. I glanced toward Harrison. His weathered face remained calm, yet there was something different in his eyes. Not surprise, not concern, expectation, as though this moment had been planned years ago. Across the table, Isabel sat perfectly still. She had always been the most composed person in the room. During business negotiations, family disputes, and difficult conversations, she never seemed rattled. Yet now her fingers rested tightly around her glass. David noticed it too. He looked toward her with growing uncertainty before turning back to Thomas. "What missing heir?" he finally asked. His voice sounded careful, almost reluctant. Thomas lowered the document. "The will does not provide further clarification at this stage," he replied. "Only that no final distribution can occur until all individuals listed in the original family record are accounted for." Eleanor quietly set her teacup down. The soft sound against the saucer seemed unusually loud. She immediately looked away when she noticed me watching her. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. After another few pages, Thomas announced a short recess before continuing with the remaining provisions. Chairs shifted. Conversations remained absent. Family members drifted into small groups throughout the estate, but nobody discussed what had just happened. That alone told me everything I needed to know. They were avoiding the subject on purpose. I stepped into the east hallway where dozens of framed family photographs covered the walls. Generations of Harrisons smiled from charity events, graduations, holidays, and anniversaries. I had walked past these photographs my entire life without giving them much thought. Now I found myself studying them differently, looking for something, looking for someone. Footsteps approached behind me. It was James. The old butler paused beside a photograph from nearly 20 years earlier. His eyes lingered on the image before he spoke. "Funny thing about family history," he said quietly. "People think removing a name is enough." I turned toward him. "What does that mean?" James did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the dining room where the others remained gathered. Then he lowered his voice. "Ask yourself a simple question, Ethan. If nobody existed, why would Harrison protect them in his will?" Before I could respond, James walked away. I looked back at the photographs. For the first time in my life, I was no longer seeing what was there. I was beginning to notice what might be missing. The rest of the afternoon passed beneath a cloud of quiet tension. Thomas eventually resumed reading the will, but nobody seemed focused on the financial details anymore. The missing heir had become the only subject that mattered, even if nobody was willing to say it aloud. By early evening, guests and advisors had left the estate. Only family members remained. The house felt strangely different, as if the walls themselves had begun remembering something long forgotten. I could not stop thinking about James's question. If nobody existed, why would Harrison protect them in his will? After dinner, I returned to the east hallway. The portraits stretched along the walls exactly as they always had. Generations of Harrison family history displayed in carefully arranged frames. Yet now I studied every photograph with a level of attention I had never given them before. Graduation ceremonies, charity galas, Christmas gatherings, summer parties beside the lake house. At first, everything appeared normal. Then I noticed something unusual. In one photograph from nearly 20 years earlier, David stood beside Eleanor during a holiday celebration. The composition felt awkward. There was too much empty space between them. In another photograph, several family members appeared shifted slightly toward one side. The arrangement seemed unnatural. I moved closer. The more photographs I examined, the more the pattern repeated. Empty spaces, odd positioning, gaps where someone might once have stood. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I quickly walked toward the library and searched through several family albums stored inside a cabinet near the fireplace. Page after page revealed the same strange details. People positioned awkwardly, cropped edges, missing sections. It was subtle enough that most people would never notice. But once I saw it, I could not stop seeing it. Around 9 o'clock, I carried 3 albums into the library reading area and spread them across a large wooden table. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows overlooking the grounds. The room smelled of old paper and polished wood. As I compared photographs from different years, one image immediately caught my attention. It showed a family gathering beside the lake house. Harrison stood near the center. David appeared much younger. Eleanor smiled beside him. Yet there, near the edge of the frame, I found something none of the other photographs contained. A small hand resting on David's shoulder. The rest of the person had been removed. Only the hand remained. My pulse quickened. Someone had not simply disappeared from family conversations. Someone had been erased. And for the first time, I began to suspect that the missing heir named in Harrison's will was not hidden in legal records alone. They had once been standing in the middle of this family. The discovery kept me awake long after the rest of the estate had gone quiet. I sat alone in the library studying. The photograph beneath the warm glow of a reading lamp. The small hand resting on David's shoulder should not have existed. If someone had gone to such lengths to remove a person from family history, why had they missed that detail? Outside, rain drifted across the windows while shadows stretched between the towering bookshelves. Around midnight, I heard the library door open. James stepped inside carrying a small tray with coffee. He glanced at the photograph spread across the table and immediately understood what had captured my attention. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he carefully set the tray down beside me. "You finally found it," he said quietly. "Found what?" I asked. James looked toward the fireplace before answering. Proof that the story was never complete. My pulse quickened. Who was removed from these photographs? James studied me for several seconds. His expression carried the weight of someone who had protected a secret for many years. "That is not the right question," he replied. "The right question is why." Before I could press further, he reached into his jacket and removed a small brass key attached to a faded tag. He placed it on the table beside the photograph. "Archive storage." The words were handwritten in black ink. I stared at the key. "What is this?" James looked toward the hallway to make certain nobody else was nearby. There are records in this house that were never placed in the family library. Harrison wanted them preserved. Not displayed. Preserved. My heart began racing. Why are you giving this to me? James gave a faint smile. Because Harrison knew someone would eventually ask questions. He just did not know who. With that, he turned and left the room. I remained seated for several moments, staring at the brass key. The grandfather clock somewhere in the estate struck midnight. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Finally, I stood and followed the directions written on the tag. The key led me beyond the main library, through a narrow service corridor hidden behind a row of shelves. At the end of the passage stood a locked wooden door I had never noticed before. The brass key fit perfectly. The lock clicked. Slowly, the door opened inward. Beyond it sat a small archive room filled with boxes, albums, files, and decades of carefully stored family records. And resting on the very first shelf was a photograph frame turned face down, as though someone had been afraid of what it revealed. My hands hesitated for only a moment before I picked up the photograph frame and turned it over. The image immediately explained why someone had hidden it. Harrison stood in the center of the picture beside a much younger David. Eleanor stood nearby, smiling toward the camera. But there was another child standing between them. A girl, around 8 or 9 years old. Light brown hair, bright eyes. Comfortable enough with everyone in the photograph to suggest she belonged there. Not a guest, not a visitor. Family. I stared at the image for several seconds. The child appeared in the exact position where the empty spaces in other photographs seemed to originate. My pulse quickened. On the back of the frame, written in faded blue ink, were 3 words. Lily. Summer 2002. The name meant nothing to me, yet somehow it felt familiar. I placed the photograph carefully on the desk and began searching through the archive shelves. Box after box contained records the main family library did not. School papers, holiday cards, birthday invitations, family newsletters. The deeper I searched, the more frequently the same name appeared. Lily. Every document suggested she had once been fully integrated into the Harrison family. Then I discovered a storage box labeled personal records. Inside were report cards, camp registrations, and handwritten notes. One school document caught my attention immediately. It listed emergency contacts for students attending a summer academic program. Under Lily's name appeared Harrison's phone number and home address. My stomach tightened. There was no longer any doubt. She had been connected to the family in a significant way. Around 1 in the morning, I found something even more surprising. A folder containing correspondence between attorneys. Most of the documents were routine administrative records. Then I noticed a familiar signature. Thomas, the family attorney. Attached to one letter was a note indicating that certain files had been sealed and transferred to private storage. The reason was not listed. Only a handwritten instruction remained visible. Preserve until disclosure becomes necessary. I read the sentence twice. Disclosure. The words sounded deliberate, as if someone expected the truth to emerge eventually. While reviewing the remaining documents, a folded piece of paper slipped from one of the folders and landed on the floor. I unfolded it carefully. It was not a legal record. It was a handwritten note. Harrison's handwriting. Short, direct, unmistakable. If this room has been opened, then the will has already begun doing its job. Find Sophia Bennett. She has the records they could not destroy. Beneath the message was a date from several years earlier. I stared at the note in silence. Whoever Lily was, Harrison had spent years preparing for the moment someone finally started looking for her. The next morning arrived gray and overcast. Low clouds hung above the estate as I drove into the city with Harrison's note folded carefully inside my jacket pocket. I had slept less than 2 hours, yet exhaustion was overshadowed by curiosity. Sophia Bennett's office occupied the upper floor of a historic building overlooking the courthouse square. The structure itself seemed ordinary, but the moment I introduced myself and mentioned Harrison's name, Sophia's expression changed. She studied me quietly before leading me into a private conference room lined with shelves of legal records. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating stacks of organized files. Sophia sat across from me and listened without interruption as I explained everything I had discovered. The hidden archive, the photographs, the documents, the note. When I finally placed Harrison's handwritten message on the table, she stared at it for several seconds before nodding slowly. I wondered when someone would find this, she said. My pulse quickened. You knew about Lily? Sophia leaned back in her chair. I knew enough to understand why certain people wanted her forgotten. She opened a locked cabinet and removed 3 thick folders. The first contained legal correspondence. The second contained trust records. The third contained copies of sealed family documents. Every page seemed connected to the same mystery. As I reviewed the files, one fact became impossible to ignore. Lily had not disappeared from family history naturally. Records had been altered, references removed, files relocated. Certain documents had simply vanished. Yet traces remained. Sophia pointed to a trust amendment dated more than 20 years earlier. This is where everything changed, she said. I studied the page carefully. A name appeared among the listed beneficiaries. Lily Harrison. My stomach tightened. There it was in black ink. Not hidden, not implied, explicitly written. She was part of the family trust? I asked. Sophia nodded. Originally, yes. I turned several pages and discovered later revisions. Her name had been removed. Entire sections had been rewritten. Signatures covered the margins. Authorizations, approvals, amendments. The process had been deliberate. Who authorized this? I asked quietly. Sophia hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her expression. Then she slid one final document across the table. Attached to the amendment was an internal memorandum listing the individuals involved in the review process. I recognized every name immediately. Eleanor, Thomas, Victoria, and at the very top of the page, above all the others, stood a single name that made my heart sink. Isabel. I drove back to the estate with the memorandum resting on the passenger seat beside me. The entire journey felt unreal. For years, Isabel had been one of the most influential voices in the family. She managed events, advised David, participated in major decisions, and always seemed to know more than she revealed. Yet now her name stood at the top of a document connected to the removal of a child from the family trust. By the time I arrived, evening shadows had begun stretching across the estate grounds. The mansion looked exactly as it always had, but I no longer viewed it the same way. Every hallway seemed to hide a secret. Every portrait seemed incomplete. I found David alone in the study near the west wing. The room smelled faintly of old leather and cedar wood. He was sitting behind a large desk surrounded by business reports he clearly was not reading. The exhaustion on his face had deepened since the reading of the will. When I entered, he looked up immediately. "Did you find something?" he asked. I hesitated before placing the memorandum on the desk. David read it slowly. The silence lasted several minutes. His eyes moved from one name to the next. Then he reached Isabel's signature. His expression changed. "This cannot be right," he said quietly. I thought the same thing. He leaned back in his chair and stared toward the window overlooking the lake. "Nobody ever talked about Lily," he said. "Not once. If she was part of the family, why would everyone pretend otherwise?" The question lingered between us. Before I could answer, another voice entered the conversation. Because some people believed the truth was dangerous. We both turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway. She looked older than I had ever seen her. The weight she carried seemed visible now. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. David immediately stood. "You knew about this?" he asked. Eleanor lowered her eyes. "Yes." The single word felt heavier than any explanation. David stared at her in disbelief. "Then tell me who she was." Eleanor remained silent for several seconds before finally speaking. Lily was not a stranger. She was not an outsider. She belonged to this family. My pulse quickened. David looked equally stunned. "Then why remove her?" Eleanor's eyes filled with regret. "Because years ago, certain people became convinced that her existence threatened everything they were trying to protect." She reached into her handbag and carefully removed a sealed envelope. The paper was old. The handwriting across the front was unmistakable. "Harrison's." She placed it on the desk between us. Written across the envelope were 7 words. "Open only after the truth begins." For several moments, nobody touched the envelope. The study remained silent except for the distant ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway. The fading evening light cast long shadows across the bookshelves and darkwood paneling. David stared at Harrison's handwriting as though it might answer every question on its own. Finally, Eleanor nodded toward the envelope. "He wanted this open when the truth could no longer be hidden," she said quietly. David carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but Harrison's writing remained clear. I watched as David began reading aloud. The first lines immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Harrison wrote that every family eventually faces a choice between protecting its reputation and protecting its people. He admitted that years earlier, that choice had divided the Harrison family in ways that could never fully be repaired. As David continued reading, the details became clearer. Lily had not been removed because of anything she had done. She had not betrayed anyone. She had not broken any rules. According to Harrison, she had become the center of a disagreement about inheritance, family image, and control. Certain members of the family believed her presence complicated the future they wanted to build. Others argued she belonged exactly where she was. Harrison described years of arguments, private meetings, and decisions made behind closed doors. Then came the sentence that stunned all of us. If Lily is ever found, she must receive the share that was always intended for her. David stopped reading. The room fell silent again. Eleanor closed her eyes. I could see tears gathering at the corners. He never changed his mind, she whispered. Not once. David turned the page. Near the bottom of the letter, Harrison had included one final instruction. Thomas was to reconvene the family as soon as sufficient evidence had been gathered. Every remaining document would then be disclosed. Every sealed record would be opened. Every participant would be identified. The entire truth would be placed on the table. Literally, my pulse quickened. Harrison had anticipated everything. He had not simply hidden evidence. He had designed a path that would eventually force the family to confront it. David folded the letter carefully. Then we finished this, he said. The exhaustion that had defined him for days seemed replaced by determination. Eleanor nodded slowly. There is one more thing you need to know. She opened her handbag again and removed a small card. A current address was written neatly across the front. Beneath it was a single name, Lily Harrison. For the first time, the mystery was no longer about who she had been. It was about where she was now. 3 days later, the Harrison family gathered once again beneath the crystal chandeliers of the old dining room. The atmosphere felt nothing like the previous reading of the will. This time, every chair was occupied. Thomas sat near the center of the long oak table with several folders arranged before him. Sophia sat beside him. Harrison's letter rested on top of the documents. Outside, autumn sunlight spilled across the estate grounds, but inside the room, nobody seemed interested in the view. Isabel sat quietly beside David. Eleanor remained beneath the chandelier. James stood near the fireplace as he always had. I took my place halfway down the table and waited. Then the front doors opened. Every conversation stopped. A woman entered the room accompanied by Sophia. She moved with the confidence of someone who no longer needed anyone's approval. Yet there was caution in her eyes as well. Years of distance could not disappear in a single afternoon. Even so, I recognized her immediately. The same eyes from the photographs. The same face from the hidden records. Lily Harrison had returned. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Thomas stood and opened the final folder. He reviewed the trust documents, the sealed amendments, the archive records, and Harrison's written instructions. One by one, the facts were placed on the table. No speculation, no rumors, no excuses, only evidence. By the time he finished, the truth was undeniable. Lily had always been part of the family. Her removal had never reflected Harrison's wishes. The records proved it. The letters proved it. The will proved it. Thomas then read the final provision Harrison had prepared years earlier. Lily's inheritance would be restored in full. The original family record would be recognized. Every amendment created to erase her would be reversed. Across the room, nobody argued. Nobody challenged the decision. There was simply too much truth standing in front of them. Finally, Lily looked toward the portraits hanging on the walls. I never wanted revenge, she said quietly. I only wanted the truth. The words settled over the room like a final judgment. Later that evening, after the meeting ended, several family members gathered in the hallway of photographs. Plans were already being made to restore the original images. Missing faces would return. Missing names would return. Missing history would return. As the sun disappeared beyond the estate grounds, I found myself looking at those photographs differently. For years, the family believed they could erase a person by removing her from the frame. Harrison understood something they did not. The truth does not disappear when it is hidden. It waits patiently for someone willing to see what has been missing all along.